Hello, everybody, and welcome to ZTV Live. Today's Thursday, September 10th, 2020. I'm Susan Mulligan Fleischman, and I'm so pleased to have you all joining us here tonight. If you would, send us a little hello or let us know you're out there. And I hope you'll join the conversation with any questions. We have a great show tonight. Virginia Amos Show is on tonight, and her guest is the one and only John Porter of Alexandria. He was T.C. Williams' principal for 22 years. He was instrumental in developing Act for Alexandria, and he's truly a living legend of Alexandria, and actually one. But let me bring Virginia Amos on without further ado. Hi, Virginia. Welcome back to your show.
Hey, Susan. It's nice to be here. At least I didn't have to swim tonight.
No, exactly. I know. Oh my gosh, the flooding up there. I feel, in fact, if anybody has any good pictures or videos of the flooding, I think that there's on the Zebra website or on the Facebook page, you can go ahead and upload some of your pictures because it was really bad. But I think some of it has, receded. Around here it was pretty bad, but it didn't, but I know a friend of mine who was trying to get home from D.C. and she was detoured everywhere. Roads were closed. It was really a mess.
Yeah, it was pretty bad. It was pretty bad.
But I did want to plug it, and you reminded me before, I did want to plug that this Saturday is the Vintage and Flea Market up in Delray, or the Delray Vintage and Flea Market, and that's this Saturday, and it's, I believe, 9 to 1, right?
9 to 1 at the corner of Mount Vernon and Bellefonte.
That's right. That's right. So I would like to. I'm gonna go up there as well. I think after.
Me too.
Yeah. Good. Maybe I'll see you up there.
Good.
That'd be great. Good.
Yeah.
Well, listen. Let me bring on your wonderful guest, John Porter. Hello, John, and welcome to ZTV Live.
Good evening. Glad to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Susan. John and I have actually never met before, which is not unusual when we do these shows. But not being a native Alexandrian and not having had children who went through the Alexandria public school system. John, I want to tell you that my first introduction to your name, at least, was when I took up rowing at the boathouse. Mm-hmm. And we had a boat named after you. And
you rowed in the John Porter?
I did row in the John Porter. And it was I think it was brand new when I started down there. And of course, everybody wanted to get the new boat. So that was my first introduction to you, was on the water in the John Porter.
It is a small world in many ways.
It is in many ways. I wanted to get started. You certainly have a long history with T.C. Williams High School. And given what's going on in the world right now, it's a little somber, but at the same time, we are coming up on the 19th anniversary of September the 11th. And you were the principal at that time. What was it like in school that day?
It was started off interestingly, shall we say, and then got a bit scary as the morning progressed. At the beginning of every school year, I did orientations for new students. Many of them still remind me of some of the things I said at orientation. I'd bring small groups of students through their English classes to the mini auditorium, which was a smaller auditorium in the career wing at TC, in the old building, of course. And for about 5 days in a row, I would meet with every student in school and go over generally the same basic welcoming information. Here's some of the rules and regulations, the things you need to know. I was interrupted. I was in the middle of a presentation, and one of the staff members, I think it might have been my administrative assistant at the time, came through one of the doors and said, "I need to see you for a minute," which was rare. That didn't happen often during these types of things. I went out and she said, "Just want to let you know a plane has crashed into one of the Twin Towers," to which I immediately thought, some small single-engine plane had mistakenly, with the pilot and/or had lost control or whatever, and had crashed into the towers. And I went back in to continue my presentation with don't misunderstand this. Not a whole lot more thought about that. A little concern about it, of course, and concern for the people that might have been injured as a result. Only to be interrupted again a few minutes later to be told there was another plane that had made impact. Seemingly, that was near the end of my first presentation. I don't remember the details clearly there, but we broke. They finished. The students went back to class, or the bell rang, and it took about 20 minutes for the next group to come in. So I immediately, having figured out this was a much bigger thing than what we had originally thought it was, went out front, in front of the career wing. I was standing there was a big parking lot in front of the career wing, which basically is where the main part of the new T.C. Williams is now. And my JROTC captain or commander, he was a colonel came out. And we were talking, and he'd been watching TV and had a little idea of what was going on. And the next thing I remember was hearing a big roar and then a crash and a large plume of smoke rising from the north. And that was when the plane hit the Pentagon.
Yeah.
My JROTC commander at that time said, "Oh my God, it's the Pentagon. My brother's in there," and he took off. We kind of went into lockdown mode at the time. It was a very scary time from the standpoint of not knowing if this was a major attack and a lot of other things were going to be happening or not. I immediately kind of hung out front and remember a sheriff. He was then a police officer, Dana Lawhorn. He was assigned to schools at that time, and Dana was a former student of mine when I was a teacher. Dana pulled up out front and said, it kind of explained a little bit about what was happening. And he said, and we've got to be careful. Apparently there's another plane that's turning and heading back in this direction, and we don't know what they're targeting. It could be a school. It could be, you don't know. And so, again, we tried to remain calm, but at the same time, we wanted to make sure we were maintaining the safety of students and all. So we stayed in lockdown mode that entire day.
Goodness.
And actually had students go down in groups to the cafeteria beginning at about 10 o'clock. It took us about 4 hours to feed everyone. And of course, by noon or soon thereafter, at least the immediate fear, concern of another attack had kind of waned to some degree. And buses came, and we loaded the buses, and people went home, all wanting to watch more and more of what was taking place. Not to say that most classes had not been doing that as the day had progressed.
Right.
It was a interesting time, and I say interesting from the standpoint of trying to manage a school of about 2,000 kids and a staff of 250, and trying to figure out what's the right thing to do. And at the same time, it certainly was scary. We did not know what this meant. We didn't know if the entire country was under attack, and there was more to come or not. And so it's hard to believe. I was thinking about this today. It's hard to believe that was 19 years ago.
I know.
Just at that day, you thought, oh my goodness, this will be in my memory or our memories forever, and it certainly was.
Absolutely. And I think I don't think I'm stretching it too much here, but what we went through 19 years ago, and granted it was a day when so much happened. You fast forward to 2020, and in both instances, these are situations that there is no planning for.
No.
It simply comes upon you, and you are doing the very best you can with what you have and what you know.
That is true. We did have some more extensive emergency plans after the Columbine shooting a couple of years prior to that.
Right.
So we had a lockdown, a shelter in place We went through some growing pains trying to develop those plans and what could come from that. But they did serve a value that day in that when we said we need to go into lockdown, the kids didn't know yet what that meant, most of them, because it was the beginning of the school year. And so those that had been there the year before had practiced the lockdown drill, if I'm not mistaken, but they probably, to be very honest, they probably didn't remember all of that. But basically, we on the staff had reviewed some of those emergency procedures, as we always do at the beginning of the year before students return. And so we kind of knew what it meant, but you're still winging it. How are we going to feed 1,800 kids, 2,000 kids? We can't wait till the regular lunch periods. We had an open campus lunch at the time. We had 2 lunch periods of about 50 minutes each, where half the student body would leave and or could go to the cafeteria or could leave campus and come back and hang for a little while until the next class began. We certainly realized we could not do that. And we decided, and I talked with the cafeteria staff, remember those discussions, about how long it would take, how many meals they could serve in a certain amount of time. And we worked it out. It all worked out. And the kids were very cooperative. I think they too were very afraid. Even I sort of remember even some of the tough guys even remarked or ones that might balk a little bit when I told them to do something or a teacher told them to do something, didn't seem to hesitate that day to kind of go with the flow or for those next few days.
Being thrown into an unusual situation will do that to you.
Definitely.
So, it's a remarkable time that we're in now. But one of the other things that you did that has had a lasting effect at TC Williams was the scholarship fund that you started. And I know it's something that the Delray Citizens Association contributes to every year. And we're always thrilled to get a letter from the recipient and find out what they've been doing and where they're going. What was the impetus behind that fund?
Well, as much as I'd love to take credit for starting it, it really was not me. I happened to be principal at the time, and I was part of it, a small part of it, but really it was a group of parents, a group of people in the community that wanted to make sure that kids, particularly kids that would have difficulty paying for college, had the opportunity to attend college. As well as some of their classmates who had the financial wherewithal and ability to be able to do that. And so it started off very small. It started off in 1986 with basically a $25,000 matching grant from the city council at that time, as I remember it, voted to contribute $25,000. And I say contribute, it was actually an allocation from their budget. But they decided to contribute to get this started. It was easily matched. And, as I say, the rest is history. It has gone on to do tremendous things for kids, starting off with very small grants to just a few kids, and now giving hundreds of kids grants annually and renewal grants. And they've increased the size of the scholarship fund grants. It's really a terrific organization. I remember some of the discussion at the time and some of the research. It was modeled after a group in Ohio that had begun this. There were only about 4 or 5 scholarship funds of this sort nationwide at the time. Now there are multiple scholarship funds doing the similar things and doing great things for kids. It's just really a wonderful opportunity for the community to come together to help kids that couldn't afford to go to school and or that merited a little additional support in going to school for the work they had accomplished while at TC.
And I think it's particularly appropriate since TC Williams is the only high school in the city of Alexandria, so that the wealth disparity is certainly on display. You have families that can easily afford to send their kids to college, as well as the families that can't. And it's not like they're divided between high schools as they might be in some counties. You have everybody right there together.
That is true. And as I tell newcomers to the city now, while if you look at any online indicator of Alexandria, median house price, median family income, education level, you'll see a very wealthy community in so many ways. At the same time, about 60% of the kids are eligible for free or reduced lunch. Mm-hmm. And therefore, we have a huge need. And many of the families with kids are the ones that are bearing the major responsibility of that need. And therefore, whatever we can do to help those kids take that next step to completing their education at college level, trade or technical school, whatever it may be, I think it's all the more, it says all the more about Alexandria and Alexandrians that they want to help.
Well, that's a good way to move into, I want to talk about ACT Alexandria. Just recently, my husband has started doing food deliveries mm-hmm. for a consortium of churches and other groups that are coming together to feed the population in Alexandria that has been left behind in this pandemic. And one of the things that he has remarked on every single time he comes back from making these deliveries is going to housing complexes that he never knew existed. Mm-hmm. That, they're tucked behind another building. There's only one way in and only one way out. Just places that he did not know about at all. And I think that says a lot about Alexandria. There's a lot that we don't see. And so the work that both the Scholarship Fund does and now ACT for Alexandria, I think hopefully is addressing those unseen.
Yeah, I think there are a number of organizations that work with or around those organizations too that are helping to address particularly the needs that we're finding right now with the pandemic. ACT it goes back to where we opened this discussion. ACT came about as a result of 9/11. Many people don't know that, but
I did not know that. Okay.
One of the people that was on the plane that hit the Pentagon was Norma Sturley. And the Sturley family's children had gone through T.C. Williams in the early 90s. Gene Sturley, who works with the Urban Institute, he's a nationally known economist. Gene came to me one day not too long after, months after 9/11, indicating that he and his daughters would like to do something with money that they were going to receive from the Victims' Compensation Fund. It may have been longer than just a few months out. And they wanted to do something to give back to the community. And we got a few people, as I always say, a lot brighter than me, together and tried to determine what was the best way to do that. We could have given it all to charity. We could have given it all to the Scholarship Fund, and that was discussed at the time. And it was $1 million+. And goodness. We ended up deciding that the way to make a longer-term commitment and way to give back to the community was by creating a community foundation, a foundation where you would raise funds, give funds back to the community while you continue to raise funds on the other end. And therefore, it wouldn't be a one shot. It wouldn't be a one cause. It wouldn't be a momentary, hey, gee, that was a great thing they did back then, and it was nice and it's done. And as we now know, ACT has continued since its founding in 2004 and has taken on different and expanded roles over the years, most recently in addressing or helping to address the equity issue in our community, but then most recently helping to work directly in supporting other agencies and organizations and doing on-the-ground work to help in this COVID crisis in which we find ourselves. So it's a great organization, and it's one that came about as a result of a tragedy, but one that if you will, took that tragedy and made something good out of it as best as you can for others over a long term.
That's a remarkable story. I had not heard that, and I really love that the family wanted to give back in such a significant way, and to really make a difference.
Well, you know, Alexandria, and I've said this when I was at ACT and said it before, we're a very caring community, a very concerned community, if you will, and a very giving community in so many ways, not just financially, but like you say, the volunteerism, going out and helping to deliver food, trying to help others in our community that are in need, that may be more heavily impacted by the pandemic than many others are. And so Alexandria is, I've always kiddingly said, most communities are unique. Alexandria is a little uniquer, and that can be taken in a number of different ways. But in this case, it's a way in which I think Alexandria is very uniquer in the sense of wanting to help and cares about others in the community.
Well, you know, that's interesting, John. You certainly have a long and storied history here in Alexandria, and you've spent your entire life here. I have been, as I've been doing this program for about 6 months now, and talking to retailers and individuals and organizations, everybody has remarked, it has basically said the same thing that you have, that the community here is strong, people want to help each other, it's very supportive. And I have to wonder to myself, is that part of that's the glue that's holding us together through this time? I mean, I look at so many, the cities that are erupting in violence, some provoked, some unprovoked. It doesn't take much to set people off these days. You know, I feel like we're living on a tinderbox for lots of different reasons. And Alexandria seems to just be working its way through this.
Yeah, I think particularly in this large metropolitan area, one of the true advantages we have is that we are a community, and we're a community both geographically, a small community, mm-hmm. and in many ways, as I tell newcomers to our community, we're like a small town in some other part of the country. Particularly, my dad was from North Carolina. It reminds me of his town of 600, even though we're at 160,000. But it's very closely knit in so many different ways. Now, that does not mean we don't have issues. That doesn't mean that something else could not develop tomorrow. But I do believe there is a strong sense of community, a strong sense of caring about others in our community, and a strong sense of figuring out ways that we can give back to make Alexandria even stronger and even better. And I know there are many, many other communities that do that too. We're not unique in that way, but we are unique in the sense that, particularly in this large metropolitan area, and particularly, to be honest, being inside the Beltway, when mm-hmm. there's so many other distractions, even in normal times, I think the camaraderie of Alexandria really draws people in and together. I saw someone on one of the Facebook apps, or someone today. They're new to Alexandria, and they just were expressing their feelings about just in a few weeks becoming and feeling a part of this this community, this bonding, if you will, that kind of develops just in a sense just by the nature of being here. Of course, I kiddingly say sometimes it takes us a while for us to call you a local. So you have to, Kerry Donnelly, who was our mayor, came here in 1968. Right. And I was asking Kerry one time after his mayoral duties, I said, so when did you move here? He said 1968. This was probably 2008. I said, well, you're almost local. Not quite. We've almost called you local. But it's very true. And I think it brings the best out in people. Again, not discounting the issues that need to be faced, the issues that need to be addressed, and particularly the ones that now seem to be multiplied as a result of the pandemic, for sure.
Yeah. Did you ever imagine there would be a year when the schools did not open in Alexandria?
No, I don't, no, this is not something, how do you plan for this?
Exactly.
And I want to commend Alexandria, and again, a number of our neighbors for particularly going from Friday, Friday, March 13th, and by Monday, March 16th, we're doing virtual instruction online. Not without some flaws, not without some problems, but the transition was a lot smoother than I had anticipated. And I was on the committees this summer talking about virtual versus hybrid and all that, and thinking that it was leaning towards virtual just by the nature of where the pandemic was. And I think that because of that experience, meaning the experience in the spring and the work that went around it, particularly on the technology side, we were able to get a smooth start this past week, too. I do have a concern, and that concern is for those kids that were having difficulties academically before the pandemic. And the tendency is that some of the reasoning that may be causing some of those learning issues prior to the pandemic are going to be a lot more difficult to deal with in a virtual type of situation. So. But ACPS is doing some things to try to make the virtual plus much more of a plus for kids, particularly for kids that have specific learning needs and or specific community and family needs too.
Well, again, like the tragedy that brought us together on September the 11th, this is one of those moments where I think people want to put their best foot forward, and despite the difficulties of, learning at the dining room table, people are doing their best to make it work and to support the people behind the people who are trying to make it work. I mean, there's so many people involved, and the list just goes on and on.
Yeah, I agree. And there's so many, particularly when this is done, there will be so many commendations that need to be made to people and thanks to people. At the same time, most of those folks are doing what they're doing for reasons other than seeking to be acknowledged for what they do. They want to help kids in the education sense. The people on the front lines on the day-to-day issues. The people out there this afternoon, we were talking earlier before we came on air about the flood, or as we were coming on air about the flooding today. The people that are out there doing their jobs, making sure that people are safe and that homes that might have been impacted are receiving some attention. It's that kind of community. We are very, very lucky to have live in the type of community that we live in the community we live in.
So pulling your crystal ball out.
I got
it. You got it. Good.
Right there.
I like that. Because you have certainly, you've seen the past. You have lived through some extraordinary times. And looking ahead, I know that everyone, I just feel like everyone wants 2020 to be over with and done in more ways than one. Do you see anything in particular going into 2021, 2022 that for the city in particular and for the school system?
Well, and I'd probably be more in line to talk about the school system than the city as a whole. I think the one, I try, and it doesn't always work this way, but I try to look at situations like that in which we find ourselves now as opportunities, ways to figure out things that might work differently and maybe better to some degree. I remember even in my years when I was with the school system and at TC in particular, I remember saying we need more alternatives for kids, meaning not everyone learns the way I learned when I went to George Washington when it was a high school. Not everyone learns in the same fashion. And particularly as they get older, we need more opportunities for more alternatives, and therefore more opportunities for kids and for families in our community. I think because of the virtual situation in which we find ourselves, this may, as we move back to face-to-face learning, this may be one of those opportunities. There are many colleges and universities at which you can now get your entire degree online.
Yes.
And I'm not necessarily saying that's for everyone, but for many people, that's a very viable alternative to get their education. There are some kids, and I'm sure there were some kids, and I'm sure there still are some kids for whom going to school every day, going to 4 or 5 different classes, sitting in a classroom, going through the traditional setting, if you will, of school is not the best way for them to learn or the way that they feel most comfortable learning. And therefore, this virtual situation in which we were thrust into may prove to be advantageous in providing some other online opportunities. Even back in the 90s when I was at TC, we used some online coursework for kids, more so in a catch-up type of way. We'd get to the end of the year and we'd have a student that needed 1 credit to graduate. He'd transfer it in or she'd transfer it in. We'd find them an online course, get them to do that. Maybe it was in the 2000s, but we'd find an online course to get them in so that they could finish their requirements. It was good for them at that time. We need more alternatives. We need more ways to provide viable options for students to learn, and I think this may be the opening of that door to some degree. We first, though, have to work through all of this so that we can sit back and think about that, if you will. This has been a mammoth undertaking for ACPS and a mammoth undertaking for school divisions across this country, and therefore we do need to give those people running these programs. They're not looking for kudos, but they're looking for a little understanding. And so I think we do need to give them some understanding of all that they are doing every day and what they need to do to make sure it's the best for the kids.
It'll be interesting, and it reminds me when I've talked to my restaurant friends, who we all agreed there's nothing in culinary school that provided you for a pandemic. But, 5 years from now in culinary school and 5 years from now in education courses, it will be so interesting to look at what they are teaching and how they're teaching because of both the opportunities and some of the solutions that come out of what we have been going through.
Exactly. And I mean, we hear about it in the business world. There are a number of larger businesses talking about, we don't need as much office space.
Absolutely.
We're going to do more remote work for our people. You're going to find that to some degree in the schools. At the same time, there are a number of kids that need that face-to-face, that need that tactile, interactive type of option. As I tell people, I'm much better in person than I am in a video conference, particularly if it's been all day. And I'm half kidding and half serious. I do much better interacting with people, reading their facial expressions, talking extemporaneously instead of kind of waiting for a pause, if you will.
Sure.
But there's a place for everything, and that's what's really something that I think might be positive, again, that comes out of this, if you will, truly negative thing that we're going through right now.
It is, and I think that's just a great way to wrap up here. That there is blue sky ahead. At some point, the sun's going to come out, and we're going to have learned a lot. And for those of us who have certain coloration in their hair,
or have hair,
or have hair, we can look back and we know that all these things pass, and that you learn, and that you move on. And if the foundations are good, like they are here in Alexandria, there's great opportunity.
Agree, wholeheartedly agree.
So, John, thank you so much for being with us. It's really delightful to put a face to a name and not just a boat. Um, so, thank you so much for being with us. You're a busy man, and I'm glad you made time in your schedule for us.
I enjoyed it immensely. Thank you very much for having me.
All right. Thanks, John. And over to you, Susan.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Virginia. John, what a wonderful interview. It was wonderful to meet you and to get to know you. I've heard wonderful things about you, and now I can see why. So thanks so much for coming and joining us on ZTV Live.
And thank you.
Okay, Virginia, we'll see you next week, Virginia.
Sure will.
Okay, so that is going to do it for this Thursday night for ZTV Live. I just wanted to give you a little heads up of what's going on next week. Monday night, we have our music man, Steve Hauk, and his Living on Music. His guest will be Ruthie Logsdon. She's a local music legend and the leader of Ruthie and the Wranglers, and I believe one of the Wranglers will also be with them for some live music and for some talk and laughs, conversation. On Tuesday, I'll be hosting a special edition of ZTV Live with the Animal Welfare League, and we will be profiling a couple of the animals that are living there right now. So that's going to be a really fun session, so make sure you tune in for that. On Wednesday, the Zebra's own Allison Preeb, our Buzzworthy host, will launch back her special Buzzworthy episode here, so stay tuned for further details on that. We'll be teasing about that show on Facebook pretty soon. And then on Thursday, Virginia Amos will be back, of course, with Melanie Runyon of Truly Life Skincare and Garden Gifts. Oh, hold on. Yes, Virginia?
Yeah, slight change. We've
okay.
switched it. It's going to be Val Hawkins, and we're going to be talking about Agenda Alexandria.
Oh, perfect. I'm so glad that you were here. Thank you so much for that correction. Okay, so tune us in for next week. Thanks, Virginia. I'm going to... okay,
I'll
so
send
that...
it to you.
Okay, great. That will do it for us for... ZTV Live tonight. I was just thinking back on how Virginia and John ended their conversation tonight about in the midst of all the negativity and the real mess that we find ourselves in with the coronavirus and the pandemic. And I've never been so amazed at the creativity of people really finding new ways to cope, and we're all finding a new way to do things. And I think that a lot of those new ways, as they were talking about, are going to be a new way. So they're going to be continued. And so every cloud absolutely does have a silver lining. And I think that hopefully I can't wait to see when the silver linings kind of outweigh the clouds. So anyway, with that, I hope everybody has a fabulous weekend. And we will see you here next week. And until then, remember to be kind and also, as much as you can, to be the good news in someone's life.